Where's the music?
You're fine, Harvey. Just start the music.
This is going?
Yes, this is going. You're good. I put it back on, so just start the music.
You're about to hear a revolution in talk radio. Liberty Talk Radio, where the critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly.
Wow.
In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to Liberty Talk Radio, America's libertarian voice, broadcasting from our studio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to around the world. I'm your host, Joe Cristiano, and this is your antidote to popular talk radio. Folks, it's time for us to take back control of our government now before this bureaucratic, oversized, and self-serving federal government starves us of our property, our freedom, our rights, and our liberty. But to do this, we must shed conventional thinking regarding our political structure. We need to be revolutionaries in thought, dissidents in action. Only after we recognize what our government is doing to our freedom and our Constitution will we start taking it back. And this program is just about that. Today, we are pleased to have a returning guest, economist Andy Sutton. Andy was formerly of the financial community. However, he is now involved for the sole purpose of blowing the whistle on corruption and helping people around the globe become their own advocates. Andy, welcome back to Liberty Talk Radio.
Hi, Joe. Thank you for having me back. As always, it's a pleasure to be here and always look forward to talking to your audience.
Great. Thank you so much, Andy. I really enjoy your dialogue. Well, let me start off by saying I probably should not be on the air today for the reason that I am just so disgusted and angry at about everything that's going on. There's very little that I, especially from mainstream television, that I agree with, that I think makes any sense. And yet we have a cacophony of groups who are all cheerleaders for what is going on. And I must be a doomsdayer because I see nothing but catastrophe in front of us. And everyone is singing hallelujah. Am I far? Should I just go see a shrink right now? Or is there some credence to my skepticism?
Well, everybody has a good reason to be skeptical, just based on history, if nothing else. I mean, look at what's going on right here today as we're doing this. The idiotic Dow Jones Industrial Average, let me see where it finally finished up today. Oh, it was down a little bit. What a shame. But we're having a race, whether the Dow gets to 20,000 first, or whether the national debt gets to 20 trillion first. Right now the national debt's, I think, on a better pace than the Dow. And it's really, neither should be the case.
Right.
That's the bottom line. And no matter what garbage you hear from different media outlets and all this sort of thing. And my sidekick, Graham, we were talking about this the other day, and you can't get wrapped up in that kind of stuff. What we're looking at, we look at policy. We look at proposed policy. And what we're seeing continuing to go on here, despite what happened a month and a half ago or whenever it was back in November, everything's going to change now. Everything's going to be great and fantastic. We're seeing, a cabinet that's stuffed with Council on Foreign Relations members and Goldman Sachs bankers, and this is going to be more of the same, unfortunately, despite all the happy talk and the big mouth and the promises for, we're going to make America great again. Well, great what? We're putting warmongers where they don't belong. It's the same thing. It's, somebody, I forget who it was, said this, said it might as well have been that Jeb Bush won the election.
Right. Yeah.
For all that's going on here. And I'd love to be proven wrong. I mean, let's just go out on the record and say that. I'd love to be proven wrong, but I think people need to understand, and they need to be reminded for those that do understand, once again, how little the White House really has to do with forming economic policy, with forming foreign policy. Even under a constitutional, if the government was following the Constitution, the president should have almost no say in any of that stuff. That stuff comes from Congress. The executive branch is there merely to make sure that Congress's wishes are executed. That's it.
Yeah.
So even if we were doing things right, which we're not, the president would have a very minimal role. Instead, the president ends up today basically being a spokesperson for this or that neocon group or neo-lib group or whatever you will, and championing these ideas and trying to get people behind them. So really, what you have here is you have a personality. You've had a personality in the White House for the last 8 years, and that personality has championed certain ideas. Now you're going to have another personality. And Donald Trump has already gone on record saying he doesn't mind running up the national debt. We need, more nukes, stronger military, more foreign intervention. We're going to go over that. I mean, he knows more than the generals about ISIS, remember. So we're going to go over there and we're going to kick some more butt, and what's going to end up happening, the same thing that's been going on for the last 15 years. And frankly, I'm getting sick of it. These are our sons, our daughters, brothers, sisters, cousins, best friends, what have you, that are going over to these places, and they come back. And I know a couple of these guys that have been over there, and they'll never be the same again. And it's a disgrace. And it's being done not because, we're protecting America. No, we're protecting the U.S. dollar, this stupid hegemonic situation where everybody has to take the dollar, and the dollar, petrodollar, what have you, is king, and everything else is crap. And you know what? I'm sick of the crap. I mean, I know you are too.
Oh, I beyond sick.
I'm fed up, to the 99th floor, with this garbage, because we've been hearing it over and over and over and over again. And the thing is, you get down on Main Street, you talk to the average person, nothing changes. There's, we'll get a few token jobs back because, that was a big platform here, and that's what'll happen. You'll get a few token jobs back, but it's not going to be. That's not the establishment's plan. The establishment's plan is to take America down to the living standard of the second and third world countries. And frankly, you take the credit cards away from everybody, and that's basically what you got.
Yeah. Well, everyone's applauding Trump because he has saved about 1,000 jobs from the Carrier Corporation. And when you dig into it, all that was crony capitalism with backroom deals being made. Nothing was really coming. He saved nothing. And the only way that he can really save this country is instead of and I'm not the only person saying this. I said this first, by the way, and then I read it, so I give myself some credit, is that instead of appointing people to his cabinet, he should have dissolved his cabinet. We don't need a secretary of this, that, and everything in the world. We need the people to run the business of business, not the government. And it seems that all he did was overload it again with all backroom people rather than dissolving it and saying, businesses, how to conduct yourself. Why don't you just do that, and let us know if you have any problems. But no, he loads up front end up, with all of these crony capitalists. They come in, and now they're going to solve the problems. And everyone's cheering. I mean, are we back at Idiocracy, that movie Idiocracy? That was 10 years ago, where people were just repeating all the crap they heard on television? Because I seem like I have this special insight, which I don't. I'm not that bright, but I shouldn't be here today because I'm so angry. When I talk about this, it's difficult for me to even discuss it in a level that's even somewhat complimentary to the person I'm speaking to, because I just automatically get angry at the entire process.
Well, you know what? And there's a lot of that. And let's get something straight. I mean, I am not at all saying that I was for Hillary Clinton to win this election. Frankly, like I said, the presidential election means about this much. They spend $1 billion, $1.5 billion, whatever it is, on campaigning for what? A job that pays $400,000 a year? I mean, yeah, the power comes afterwards when you can hit the college speech circuit and get paid $20,000 an hour, or whatever outrageous sum it is, or you can give speeches at Goldman Sachs and tell them how you're going to insulate them from all the laws that are supposed to protect people like you and me. I mean, it's all crooked. The whole thing, this whole drain the swamp nonsense, and then they come out and they say, well, that was just a campaign thing. We're not draining the swamp, crying out loud. They're filling it back up.
Right.
They're putting even more of these slugs in there. I mean, just take a look at it. Council on Foreign Relations, Goldman Sachs. I know I'm harping on those two, but these are the same folks that have given us what we've been going through here for the last several administrations. And, policy-wise, they're not changing anything. Yeah. You're going to get a different flavor. You're going to get a different schmuck, behind the podium that's going to be talking to you. And, and I'm going to tell you something. What we're seeing right now in 2016 is exactly what we saw back in 2008. It's just with a different group of people. Everybody, everything's going to be fixed. Remember, Obama was going to pay everybody's mortgage and take care of their car payments and all this other stuff. Well, now you got the opposite where, Trump's going to fix the healthcare system and this and that and the other thing. And, we're going to go and kick some terrorist butt. And I'm like, yeah, come on. Like you said, people, mile wide, inch deep, if that. I've seen nothing policy-wise that gives me any reason to be optimistic about what they're planning on doing. And the kicker is, I just heard this today, and I'm not sure if it happened today or not. I guess the ambassador to Israel, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, is actually Trump's former bankruptcy lawyer. So that tells you how much he knows about freaking business. Everybody touts this guy as a big businessman. Then what the heck does he need a bankruptcy lawyer for? If you're a successful businessman, you don't have a bankruptcy lawyer, do you?
No, not yet.
Me either. I never
yet.
had one.
I should work on one,
And I tried to tell people about this going in. Look, this individual, is basically one of these people who was born on third base, thinks they hit a triple, and then, taking advantage of the tax code to get quote unquote rich. I mean, and then go on to, these reality TV shows and you're fired and blah, blah. You know what? Give me a break. Get out of here with this nonsense. Let's get a statesman, in the White House instead of a schmuck, a buffoon, with a big mouth. I don't like the guy.
What I would have preferred if I heard him say once I get into office, I'm putting through legislation or executive, I prefer not an executive order, but legislation to do away with the Department of, and fill in the blank. In fact, if they all go, was fine. Department of Education, gone. Public school system, gone. You want to send your kids to school? Send them to school. If you don't, teach them at home. They'll be better off because only half the kids graduate high school anyway from every major city in the United States. Only half. We get 51% of the students in cities of the United States, and and that includes places like Tulsa, which is a very small city or a big town. Even included this size city, 300 million people. 300,000 people. And only 51% of the children, students, graduate. And you think at that point, if you ran any business or had any product or any service where you failed half the time you'd say there's something wrong, it's got to be improved. And all they do is spend more money, and guess what happens? It gets worse. You think if this guy had an ounce of brains, real business sense, he would have said, Department of Education, gone. All these people making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in these administrative positions that do nothing but clog up the system and drain us dry. You're out of a job, no pension, out of here. If you don't like it, get out of the country. I mean, I want to hear something like that. But all I hear is we're going to improve it. We're going to put more money towards it. We're out of money. In fact, our balance of trade deficit, we talk about, well, our balance of trade deficit improved somewhat in the past couple of months. You know why? Because we delivered a lot of military hardware, jet planes and stuff like that we're selling war goods around the world. If we didn't sell war goods, we would sell hardly nothing. And so I am very discouraged that we are not tackling the problem. We're not only not draining the swamp, we're filling it with sludge.
Oh, absolutely.
Other than that, I have no comment to make.
And this is, I don't want this to turn into a bash session. But I mean, this is the way it is, and this is what people need to understand. And they can get mad if they want, and they will. And we put our last 2 cents out here, disregard for fiscal responsibility, and outline what has happened, since 1980. As far as the national debt's concerned, who was in charge of the White House, who was in charge of the Congress, and broke it all down and just looked at, this debt has just marched upward. It's gone, pretty much according to mathematical, a mathematical function, and is getting higher and higher and higher and higher. And it doesn't matter who's in charge, whether it's the Republicans, the Democrats. This is something that was set in place, and it's going to keep going. And we're going to cross 20 trillion. And by the time 4 years have gone by, we're going to be at 25 trillion, or thereabouts. And it's just, people are so desensitized because they've heard it so many times. They're like, you know what? It's too big a number to even fathom.
Right.
Well, what are we going to do about it? Well, we'll just ignore it. We'll let, they'll figure it out. They'll rip some, they'll renege on it. They'll rip somebody off. And these fools, I just put up a thing to Graham today, and he posted it on the blog about this 5-year note auction that they had, and people are buying these bonds like crazy. U.S. bonds, government bonds, treasury bonds. Why, in the name of anything that is sane and smart, would you? That's like going to the local bum who lives in a house that he owes $400,000 on. He makes $650 an hour, $725 or whatever, he's allowed to make an hour. And he's up to his earlobes in credit card debt, and you're going to give him a loan. And he promises he's going to pay you back with some interest in 5 years. Would you? I mean, who in their right mind would do that? But here's the thing. Guess what? I think what we have going on here is, we've got this military, and basically, you're going to buy this stuff, or, there's some things we can do, and we're going to make your life miserable. And if you don't want to do your business in dollars, well, we can make your life miserable there too. We'll turn you into a terrorist state. We'll use our propaganda machine, namely the alphabet soup television networks and so forth. We'll turn you into a terrorist rogue state, and we'll intervene. We'll go in there. We'll rig your elections. We'll do that. We'll rig your elections. We'll conduct covert activities. Just read John Perkins' book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman.
Oh yeah.
And this is what these people do. They go in there and they trash these countries, and they throw out lawfully elected leaders, and they put in these puppet regimes that are going to do what the establishment wants them to do. Gaddafi, he spent a lot of his oil money on things for his people. I mean, I'm sure he wasn't a saint, but I'd just go and make the stretch that he's probably better than what we have. And you know what? What was his big crime? He didn't want to accept dollars, so he got a bullet in the head. You know, and that's one of the things that all these people have in common. And if you've listened to the show for any length of time, you've probably heard us talk about this, a zillion times. But these are things that have to be brought up, and people need to be reminded of this stuff every so often, because the average American, their political memory is like 3 months, maybe 6. So this is something you need to bring up and remind people of. I mean, you sit there and look at, now we have Syria. Now, what are they going to do about Syria? I found it very ironic that a CEO of Exxon is made the Secretary of State, and ExxonMobil, they're the ones who contracted with the government of Qatar to bring the natural gas from Qatar up to the Mediterranean, and the proposed pipeline location was through Syria. And that, obviously, I told you the Russians weren't going to leave Syria's side, and they haven't. They've stood their ground there, and they've cleaned it out. I don't know what's going to happen next. So now all of a sudden you have an Exxon CEO who's the Secretary of State. So, the little chemical weapons attacks and all that other stuff, the ISIS thing didn't work. So, what are they going to come up with next? Because I don't think they want to let that go. Right. And Putin, he's sitting over there. He knows all this stuff.
Do you think there's going to be a trigger event that's going to, as Jim Ricketts would classify as the snowflake effect, of an avalanche, that one little snowflake that lands in the right place at the right time with the right wind conditions, and the whole mountain comes down? I mean, do you sense any trigger event that's going to occur that's going to create all of this, this last snowflake theory?
Well, it did seem a few months ago like we had gotten pretty close on a couple of occasions. American fighters and Russian fighters were getting too close to each other, and there was a lot of saber rattling and things like that. Now that seems to have calmed down a little bit, but then you look at what the outgoing administration just released here the other day. They've come up with now a package of things that they're going to do to the Russians to punish them for interfering with our election. So they're still pushing that whole thing. That the Russians hacked into these email accounts and these email servers, and they allowed this stuff to be leaked out, and it was for the purposes of influencing the election. And it's like, hey, you know what, guys? If you didn't have any dirt, then it shouldn't have mattered.
That's right.
I mean, you could take that approach too, but they've Country Joe said that we'll have something for them here in a little bit. Now you got a Russian ambassador dead. There was another diplomat that was killed the same day. Some jerk drove a truck into a market in Germany, and it was like boom, boom, boom. These things happen 1, 2, 3, right back to back to back. So it kind of makes you wonder. Well, now the administration is coming out and they're saying, well, we've got a package of things we're going to do. We've got some sanctions and some cyber stuff of our own that we're going to do. So hey, could that trigger? Sure. I don't think the Russians are going to sit there and be intimidated.
Yeah,
I just don't see them doing that.
I was at a meeting on Tuesday, and there's a business meeting. The national debt came up, and one person, I had mentioned that the national debt current portion is $20 trillion, and of course that's the government figure. It's probably much higher than that because we don't seem to count the trillions of off the balance sheet items, whatever. And then of course the long-term debt, depending on how you calculate it, can be anywhere from 130 trillion to 260 trillion, or better said, 1/4 of $1 quadrillion, which has so many zeros you don't have enough paper to write it on. And the answer that I received was that, we've been there before. We always seem to think that everything's going to come to an end when we reach a certain level, but things go on as normal. But there's got to be a point where, and I think the only reason why we are able to add on debt is because all the other nations around the world are in worse shape than we're in. And my answer to them was, yes. And that's because our currency is the healthiest patient at hospice.
Yeah.
And the room went silent for a while, but no one commented on it. But that's about it. I mean, it's like saying, boy, that guy's in great shape. He's going to live 6 more days. Everyone else is dying within 3. I mean, so it seems that that's a good analogy, but no one picked up on it. Everyone's afraid to talk about it. It's like, if we don't talk about it, maybe it will go away, and maybe it'll somehow miraculously fix itself, and all we have to do is talk about how great Trump is, and America will be great again, and it'll be like 1910 all over again.
Well, see, here's the thing. The next time you go to that meeting and you have that conversation and you get into that and they start talking about how strong the dollar is, ask them how that's determined. Ask them.
That's a good question, yeah.
Okay. Well, now how do we actually determine if the dollar is strong or weak? We have this dollar index. What is that? Ask them. I bet you not one single one of them can tell you one detail about that particular calculation. They have no clue. I'll tell you, the euro is 57.1% of that index. So if the euro becomes weak, and look at what's going on over in Europe. The Britons voted out. There's all kind of stuff going on there, hanky-panky, very, very sketchy stuff to try to jam that up. But you've got, several other countries that are considering referenda votes on exiting the European Union. So, that currency's, it was junk to begin with, and now it's really junk. It's definitely checked into the hospice center, to go with your analogy. So, and that's 57.1% of the dollar index. So if the euro loses 10% of its value, that means the dollar index is going to go up 5%.
Yeah,
roughly.
The dollar is in fact very weak, but again, it's the healthiest patient in hospice, at this point.
And see, and this is why you have to, if you're in their shoes, if you're in the establishment shoes, this is why you have to attack gold and silver during times like these. And this is why gold and silver has been hit so hard, because you have to maintain the illusion that the dollar is strong. So the only way to do that, when people start to understand that these indexes are just, all it is a comparison. It's the dollar versus, a basket of other currencies. Well, if they're all in the toilet because of various factors, well, so what's the real measure? Well, the dollar against gold. So we got to beat up gold. And that's exactly what they do. They go in, they beat up gold. They knock the price down $150, $200 an ounce, and it helps them to maintain the illusion. Because most people are not going to sit there and first of all, you're not going to hear the dollar index on the evening news. You're not going to hear that term. You might see the gold price, and they'll keep thinking, well, gold keeps falling. Well, everything must be good, because gold is one of those things that goes up when there's a lot of economic uncertainty. Gold should be like $5,000 an ounce by now.
Right.
If they would have the CFTC actually look into J.P. Morgan and Goldman Sachs and all these other banks that like to short. They'll short a year's worth of mine supply at one shot and not think anything of it. And it has a tremendous effect on the price of the physical metal. And what you end up seeing happening is, the paper price goes way down, and that premium between the paper and the physical starts to broaden. So in other words, if you actually want to get physical, you're going to pay quite a bit more than what the spot price is, because the spot price is a paper price. That whole system there needs to be revamped. That whole future system needs to be revamped. You should not be allowed to just infinitely roll over contracts. You maybe should get one rollover, and then you take delivery.
Now, isn't it true that there for every several hundred ounces that are traded, you know, in the overnight short positions and whatever, there's only 1 ounce of precious metals backing it up? That should someone call those shorts, the whole ball game is over?
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's just like the silver banks back in the 1800s, you know, where you'd have the, you know, out in the territories. They weren't states at that time. They were, you know, the Dakota territories, places like that. You had all these banks, and they ran on silver. But what they would do is they would issue paper because of, you know, and it was supposed to be 1-to-1 or whatever. Right. And of course, what happened is the bank would end up issuing way more paper, and then they had silver to back up, and then you'd get a run. They'd run out of silver, and then what they would do is they would run to the U.S. government, and the U.S. government would basically say, well, no, you know, you don't have to come up with the silver. They'd let them off the hook. So this whole future scam is the same thing. You have people trading contracts on silver that hasn't even been mined yet, on gold that hasn't even been mined yet. It doesn't even exist above ground. It hasn't even been discovered yet in many cases, but they're allowed to use these paper instruments to manipulate the price at their leisure. Now, I look at it this way. You know what, guys? Go ahead. Knock yourselves out. Manipulate it all you want. It's just like getting the endless emails from, you know, all your favorite retailers after the holidays, you know, with these big sales that they're having, you know, 30, 40, 50% off. Well, look at it this way. Gold's down 10, 15%. It's on sale.
Yeah, that's right.
But people don't do that. They'll race out to the mall and fight each other and then beat each other up and bust TV sets over each other's head, you know, to get a phone. But to get something that has real value, something that is a store of wealth, you know, is real money, they don't want to have anything to do with it. People in this country are retarded when it comes to this stuff. And they're retarded because you got a school system that is maliciously misinforming. You have a media that is maliciously misinforming. And then you have people who it's been bred into them over these last couple of generations that, you know what, I don't need to know any of this stuff. I can live my life. I can just swipe the card. They don't care. They're ignorant. They're willfully ignorant. They don't want to know. Yeah. They don't care.
Yeah. But when you do approach them and you give them some actual facts on how things
they
really
get mad.
they get angry. They don't say, geez, I didn't, you know, it's amazing. When someone tells me something and I don't know, I go, I never thought of that. That's interesting, and I want to know about it. I don't get angry with people, but it seems that if I bring up a subject and it's someone is unfamiliar with it, they don't say, well, geez, that's interesting. How did you arrive at that? Or based on what? Or interrogate me if you're skeptical. But they get angry. They start arguing with you, and you say, well, geez, I didn't want to start an argument. I thought we were just talking about this. Here's something interesting. I just noticed this yesterday. In 1913, the dollar to gold ratio was $29.11 for each ounce of gold. $29.11 per each ounce of gold. Today, instead of being $29.11, it's $9,088 per ounce. $29 to almost $9,100 per ounce. In silver was $2.63 per ounce in 1913. That's the ratio, $2.16 per ounce of gold. Today, it's $1,005 per ounce. Now, you think someone would look at that and say, hey, we have a problem, Houston. Why am I holding on to dollars? It seems that if I was holding on to silver or gold, I would be way ahead. Maybe day to day it may fluctuate, but long term, it's a winner. But we are just so indoctrinated in thinking that gold is an ancient relic and silver is an industrial metal, and it's the Federal Reserve that's the thing that has value, not precious metals, because it goes down sometimes and you could lose all your money. But the U.S. government, you never lose your money. It's always there. It's as good as gold.
Yeah, it's as good as gold. That's why
Amazing.
The Minneapolis Fed has right on their own website, you can put in, $1 and then pick the year and it'll tell you what it's worth today. So if you go from 1913, when that bastard child was put into existence, and look today, the dollar is worth about 4.5, 4.25 cents.
Right.
That's the job. That's the great job they've done of managing inflation, because that was one of their mandates. It was to moderate, manipulate, manage inflation and maximum unemployment, price stability. Maximum unemployment, maximum unemployment. Oh, I'm sorry, maximum employment. It seems they've gone the other way. That was a Freudian slip.
Well, Andy,
but they've done such a great job of managing price stability, haven't they?
Yeah.
When the dollar won't even buy a nickel's worth. Well, that's awesome, guy, and that was all done on purpose. That's not an accident. It's not. These people aren't ignorant. These are smart people. It's a crime. I mean, let's just cut to the chase. It's a crime what has gone on here, and instead of convening grand juries, we're worried about convening Fight Club over at Walmart over the latest iPhone. I mean, it's just we're so screwed up right now. Yeah, it's unreal.
Yeah. Well, tell me, how do you? We have about another 10, 15 minutes to go. Can you give us your projections for 2017 and 2018?
Well, we're not really forecasters here, but I'll give what we have and what we've seen going on is a situation that is eerily similar to 2008, and it is the rather steady but yet defined fall in the growth of M3. And it's something I've been keeping an eye on for several months now, and we just posted a graphic the other day on the blog, and it's there for people who want to see it. And M3's gone negative as far as the growth rate twice here in the last year and a half.
Yeah, please explain to the audience what M3 is, so some people may know.
M3 is the broadest measure of the United States money supply. The government used to report this number, but they stopped doing it in 2006 because they wanted to save the taxpayers money. But there's other ways to derive that number.
Save $6.40.
Yeah, exactly. The reason they didn't want people to see it is because then people might get an understanding of what the heck's going on here. But there's other groups that, they do a regular modeling. They run, you can calculate it. You can back your way into it. And it's pretty accurate. And what happened here is, if you look from the end of 2009 to the beginning of 2011, so basically the whole year of 2010, M3 growth was negative. The broadest measure of money supply, it actually contracted. So we had actual monetary deflation, and it caused the Federal Reserve and the U.S. government to absolutely have a fit of apoplexy, because in a Keynesian fiat money system, you need inflation to have growth. If you don't have inflation, there's no economic growth.
Right.
So all the growth that we've seen over the past 100 years has been basically fraudulent. It's been inflation.
Right.
The dollar going from worth $1 to being worth 4 cents on the dollar, all that inflation there has been, rewritten and translated into economic growth. Well, anyway, there was a very fast and determined response by the monetary authorities at the end of 2010, and the rate of growth immediately jumped back up to around 12.5% by the first part of, or towards the end, I should say, of 2011. Well, here, if we go to the November of 2013 was the last peak, and then it started to drop, and the growth rate has been dropping ever since, and it's been sitting around 2.5%. You'll see a spike up, and there was one spike in the negative territory here, December of 15, and in 2016 it was pretty constant. There was one spike up, and then there was another spike down negative, and that's about where we are now. So we're right about zero growth at this point in M3.
Right.
And now I think it's time to go on the record with this possible scenario. This is a contraction would be a bad thing for a fiat economy, even though it's going to make the dollar worth more for consumers and so forth. Nobody wants a strong currency because everybody wants to be able to export. So everybody wants to be weak. So deflation causes a stronger currency, a stronger dollar in this case. But what I've been wondering, and I've shared this with Graham, and he concurs, we wonder if what we're not seeing is a setup where either by allowing it to go negative or by actually forcing it to go negative, they don't trigger a severe recession and then hang it around the neck of Trump's form of capitalism.
Yep.
And then use that as a springboard. Hey, this is why we need socialism, because capitalism is a failure, da 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 da. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So this is something to watch. Now, I don't know if this is going to take place or not yet. We're still watching, and we're going to have to keep watching. But it's something to keep in the back of your mind as far as possibly what's going on. And this would be something that I would think would play out over the next year or two. So that kind of answers one of your questions. As far as the stock market goes, that'll go wherever the establishment wants it to go. I don't look at technical data anymore because it's worthless. There's so many guys out there, they collect thousands of dollars in newsletter fees every year, and all they're doing is basically making guesses. They'll look at them and say, well, we got this pattern, we got that. You know what? It doesn't matter. They can run it up, they can run it down, they can do whatever they want to it. So to me, it's irrelevant.
Yeah.
If it hits 20,000, hey, it might hit 30,000. It might hit 40,000. It doesn't matter. And then besides, if it's performing poorly and they want to spruce things up a little bit, they just throw out people like Lehman got thrown out. I'm trying to think who else was in there back in 08. I got the list somewhere. But they threw 3 or 4 Dow components out because they were underperforming. So if they'd have left those in, you wouldn't have 19,800. It would be considerably lower than that.
Yeah. What do you think is going to happen?
AIG. It wasn't Lehman. I'm sorry.
That's
it was
right.
AIG. Was one of the big ones that got tossed.
Yeah. Andy, what do you think is going to happen after the euphoria of this Trump victory plays itself through, and then they realize the emperor has no clothes, type thing, and they realize that, that, hey, this guy is a good talker, he's a great cheerleader, he's sometimes fun to listen to, but he has no idea what he's talking about. Things are actually getting worse, and every time he tries to tweak it, it accelerates the decline. Is that going to be the time that the bubble burst and then people run for the hills? Because right now, they're not spending any money. Just the other day, yesterday, in fact, my wife and I, we went over to J.C. Penney, I think it was, one of the major department stores. She had to return something. And Andy, the store was so, this is after Christmas now, so jam-packed with clothing, you could hardly walk through the aisles. I mean, it looked as if they doubled up on the amount after Christmas. And my wife, exchanged what she ever exchanged, There were people milling around. And I actually had the feeling that if someone came in with a shopping cart and just took a bunch of clothing off the shelves, off the racks, threw in the shopping cart, and walked out with it, didn't pay for it, and walked out with it, that the guard at the door would open the door and escort them to their car. Anything to get rid of it. No, really, I had this thought in my mind. I said, I'll bet they'll pay us to steal this stuff because there's no room to walk. What are they going to do with all this stuff? And this is after Christmas. People don't have the extra income. They're not. The velocity of money is down, way down. That means people are not spending money. Trump, no matter what Trumponomics is going to be, ain't going to fix it. So there's got to be they say come to Jesus meeting someday, and someone's going to say, hey, this doesn't work, and everyone's going to have doubt. And once doubt comes in, and I think the reason the mainstream media is pumping Trump up so much is to dispel any doubt that anybody may have regarding what's going to happen in our future. Because the second someone says, well, maybe not, the ball game is over. Am I overemphasizing that too much?
No, and this kind of ties into what I was saying with the M3. There's another fantastic indicator, and I also had somebody send me an email the other day. They were talking about vehicles. These vehicles are, they're putting them almost on top of each other.
Right. Same thing here.
At these storage areas, because they can't sell them. Everybody's offering incentives and employee pricing and all this other kind of stuff, these emoluments to get people to try to buy these cars, and it's not happening. Rates are low. What else are you going to do? They're going to have to keep cutting prices. People don't have the money. I'm going to be very curious to see, and the thing that I hate about looking at consumer credit numbers is we have to wait till February to see what December's numbers look like.
Yeah.
We'll get a little glimpse here in January. We'll get to see what November's numbers look like, and that whole end of the month there, Black Friday, and I guess they should call it Black Eye Friday, because that seems to be more of what happens now than anything else. But you mentioned velocity of circulation. I just pulled up a chart just for 2016, and it's going straight down. It is that trend that we've talked about before on many occasions is continuing to stretch out, and that means money's moving slower through the economy. It's not a good indicator. I mean, it is a good indicator, but it's not a good, what we're seeing here is not good in terms of, an economic recovery. There never was a recovery.
Right.
And that's the big thing that people need to understand. There was a little blip. If you take that chart, and I'll post that on the blog as soon as we're done here so people can look at it. If you take a look here, M2 velocity of circulation peaked out in like 1997, 1998, and then it tanked when the dot-com bubble burst, and then it made something of a recovery, and then it tanked again. We got to 2008, 2009. It made an itty-bitty little bump, and it's been just going straight down ever since. Yeah. No interruptions.
Right. Andy, we have someone on the phone. Excuse me. What area code is that? 111. Area code 111. You're on the air. Your question or comment, please. Caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, I've got a question.
Surely. Caller?
Got a question.
Yes, please.
Hello?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
When you suck a nigger dick, does it taste like a watermelon?
All right, cut. Kill it.
That's interesting.
Yeah, well,
Fucking
you know,
niggers, man.
it makes kill him, kill the air,
Yeah.
take him off the air.
See, Joe,
Okay.
this is the intelligence level
Yeah.
of people in America today. They get themselves a little Skype account. They call in when you're trying to do something legitimate and educational, and they make stupid comments like that.
Yeah.
So you know what, buddy? I hope you're proud of yourself. You got your 1.5 seconds worth of fame, but you're an idiot. And you know what? You're probably one of these people, who are beating up old ladies at Walmart to steal the TV set. I mean, really. Job very well done.
That's right. I proved that point.
You showed
right.
us your IQ.
Yeah.
Very proud of you.
Yeah. Well, what bothers me is that this jerk that just called in, he most likely is on some sort of government program, and you and I are paying for his dinner tonight.
Yeah, more than likely. Yeah. That's a sobering thought.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, getting back to the velocity and all that, if you see this continuing, I mean, this is they started keeping this metric back in 1959, and it's at all-time lows. I mean, it's gone way below any previous low, and it's persisted, and this means you're seeing dollars moving more and more slowly throughout the economy. It's kind of like you could equate it to an inventory turnover ratio for a business. The inventory is sitting on the shelves a lot longer, while the dollars are sitting in people's pockets a lot longer. But the thing is, it's not like this everywhere, and that's one thing people need to understand, because you talk to people, in some of these metropolitan areas like New York, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Baltimore, places like that, and there's pockets where you'd think that it was like the Roaring '20s again.
Right.
So it's not the same everywhere, and that's one thing people need to remember and take into account, is that these things are never consistent. It's not every single person's experience.
But Andy, in New York, for example, I'm a New Yorker, so I can relate to that. In New York, there are very large pockets of austerity, but even larger pockets of despair. I mean, if you look at parts of Manhattan, I mean, there are people paying $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month for an apartment, but you go 1 mile north of downtown Manhattan or 2 miles north of downtown Manhattan, you'll find that everyone's on public assistance. I mean, the contrast is staggering.
Oh, I know, and I can speak a little bit to what goes on down in Philadelphia. I'm not from there per se, but I lived there for a year and some months, and grew familiar with the area, and it's the same thing there. I mean, there's a lot of despair, but then you have like the suburbs, where there's a lot of wealth, so it's a dichotomy, and that's what you're seeing. And this is one of the things that you get Soros, and these people that then are trying to instigate demonstrations and race hatred and class warfare and all this kind of stuff. They're saying to these inner city folks, hey, look at these people out in the suburbs, they're rich and you're not, and they walk on your head and all this other kind of stuff, and they're trying to foment the groups against each other, and get violent protests going on. I think honestly January is going to be a difficult month for America, especially when we get closer to Inauguration Day. I think there's going to be a lot of protesting. I certainly hope and pray nobody gets hurt. People certainly have the right to speak their opinion. But we've looked at some of these things that have happened before this. A couple of years ago, you had the G20 down here in Pittsburgh, which is not far from where I'm at. And, they were beating up college kids and, this kind of thing, because they wouldn't cease and desist what was basically a lawful protest, under the First Amendment. So this is what I'm afraid of when, we start talking about, these kinds of things and people demonstrating and all that stuff. I really hope that that cooler heads will prevail, and we won't see people get hurt.
Yeah. You know, let me
that's
give
what
you.
I'm afraid is going to happen.
Let me give you my prediction, okay? For whatever it's worth, totally unqualified and a very uneducated one, but I think that a major bank, a major entity, a major group, or maybe a country, or a central bank within a country, someone is going to finally realize that they don't want to be left holding the baton. They want to be the first one out, and they're going to move. And once one person makes a move, or one entity makes the move, it's going to put the fear of loss into every other entity, and they're going to pile out like crazy, and we're going to have a crash. How crazy is that?
It's not. I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, everybody's standing there. When I say everybody, I'm talking about the big players.
Right.
They all have multiple exit strategies planned.
Yeah.
We have it on very good information from, reliable, I hate to use the word sources because they're not mine, that Deutsche Bank has already been propped up very quietly at least twice.
Yes.
You haven't heard much about them. Italy, is trying a public, or a private, I should say, bailout of its largest bank. So, you know what? These guys are all interconnected. It's a global thing. You saw this back in 2008. Nobody did anything to address the fact that, hey, if one goes down, they're going to take a few more with them because they're also interconnected. Nobody addressed that. They put the bail-in resolution mechanism into place for, dealing with these insolvent banks. But you know what? There's not enough depositor money to bail these guys out because they have derivatives and, all this stuff, and, at 100 to 1 to what their depositors, funds are worth. It's just, it's a scam basically to fleece the depositors, if you ask me.
Yeah. Because
there's no way that you're just gonna prop these. You're not gonna prop up $1 trillion worth of derivatives with $800,000 worth of deposits.
Yeah.
It's just not gonna happen.
Yeah. What scares me is that because a good portion of the world is on some sort of government assistance or welfare program, whether it be food, housing, work permits, whatever the case may be, when there's a crash, all of these people are going to be out of luck. They don't have any reserve because their reserve was getting their money from the government. Once that goes bye-bye, there's going to be a few haves and a lot of have-nots, and that's going to spell doom for us as a society. And I guess with that, I want to leave on a high note, by the way, because we're about out of time. But please feel free to comment on that for 30 seconds and then wrap things up for us, Sandy.
Well, yeah, and that's exactly it. I mean, you've got, and this is a global phenomenon.
Right.
It's not just the United States. This idea of living off the government, living off the taxpayer, and it's not just people. Corporations are doing it too. They're living off tax breaks, favorable government policies, things like that. What happens if all that becomes, I shouldn't say if, I should say when, all of that becomes, compromised because of government's inability? Look at Greece. They go hat in hand to the IMF, and they have these milestones that they have to make in order to keep getting their handout. And those milestones are just choking off their people. And they're barely making these milestones, and if they don't make them, they're not going to get any more bailout money. It's just a rotten situation. Right. This is where, and this goes all the way across the board. Dependence, when you start talking about fiscal dependence, you start talking about welfare, things like that, it never ends well for the person who is dependent, because they're basically like the debtor, and the person that's providing the assistance is like the creditor, and the creditor always has the upper hand.
Right.
And that's why we're here doing what we're trying to do here, is to encourage people to whatever extent possible to get out from under that arrangement if it applies to them.
Yeah.
And if not, tell your friends. I mean, seriously, this is, this is getting very serious. Again, there's so much stuff going on. Yeah, it seems quiet on the surface, but man, you get underneath a layer or two,
Right.
and there's a lot of rumblings going on.
Right. Well, Andy, I'd like for you to return to Liberty Talk Radio about the third week in January. Trump will be have the inauguration will be a week or two old, I guess. When is an inauguration? Does anyone know? What
20th.
Oh, it's the 20th. All right, then we have to have it. We have to give him a week. Maybe the last of the end of the third week in January, or the beginning of the fourth week, and let's see where we are and see what has transpired and if there may be any changes at all. Would you like to come back about that time and give us an update?
Absolutely.
Okay,
yeah, absolutely.
great.
That sounds good.
Okay.
I mean,
Andy.
like I said, I mean, we're chomping at the bit here to get some policy to analyze and
Right.
see what the potential impacts and all that kind of stuff are going to be. And you can't analyze rhetoric. That's the problem.
Right. It's
You
going
need
to be
an actual policy.
It's going to be interesting to see if a lot of this glitter of Trumpism right now wanes or dulls down a little bit even before the inauguration, and that would make things even more volatile. But with that, I'll leave those as fun. Andy, thank you so much for being on Liberty Talk Radio. We do look forward to seeing you again.
Excellent. Thanks, Joe.
Okay.
I always appreciate it. Happy New Year.
Oh, but by the way, before we go off, please tell our the listeners how they can get in touch with you or your website, etc.
Just go to andysutton.com, www.andysutton.com, and it'll take you right to the blog, and there's a contact form on there if you want to ask a question or make a comment or anything like that. So that's how you find me.
Okay, Andy, thank you so much. Folks,
Take care.
Thank you. Folks, this is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support. We'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends and let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Remember, as my wife would say, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, folks, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well. Stay tuned.